Hi everyone, I'm Law of the West, and I've got a few updates to share with you about the Tumbril Storm. One of the things that they said about it was that it shares the same garage size as the Nova tank and all the Atlas platform vehicles. So what does that mean? It means that anything that can fit a tank can also be used to carry a Storm. But it gets a little better than that. Since the Storm's not even half as tall as the Nova, it's going to be able to fit into any of the ships that the Nova could have potentially fit into if it wasn't so tall. So the Storm is going to be able to be transported by ships like the Carrack and the Corsair, and CIG has confirmed this. It also means that based on these size comparisons, it should also be able to fit into the back of a Valkyrie. Another clarification that they gave about the Storm was with how fast it's going to be. And although they're not willing to go into specifics, they've said that its speed is going to be close to the Ursa rover while also being faster than the Nova or any of the vehicles in the Atlas series. And another thing that they talked about in more detail is with the Storm's armor. After they've moved on to completely using a physicalized damage system, armor is going to be a lot more complicated and nuanced than just being light, medium, and heavy. So they didn't go into specifics about it, but they did say that its durability will end up being somewhere in between the Nova and the Centurion. But where it's placed on that line is going to be determined by how it performs and will then be balanced accordingly. And they've also clarified a number of things about the Storm's single size 3 gun. It's a remotely controlled weapon, and it sits on an articulated mount that can be raised up, which gives it a better firing arc than the Nova has. The turret can also spin in a full 360-degree circle, and yes, you are going to be able to fire its gun while the tank is moving. So why does it only have a single size 3 gun? Mainly this is because being a bespoke weapon, they can tinker with its stats and make it as powerful as they want to without having to be bound to the same restraints that other weapons have to adhere to. A good example of this is the Nova's Slayer Cannon. It's a size 5 weapon, but its alpha strike damage far exceeds what most of the other size 5 guns can do. And currently the Slayer does 18,500, while the other size 5 ballistic weapons deal out 1,500. So although it may not end up having that much upscaling when it comes to the amount of damage that it does, the Storm's weapon isn't going to be a typical size 3 gun. And if its weapon isn't performing as intended, then it can be easily fixed to change that. But the thing that they didn't mention, which can have a huge impact on how the weapon works, is going to be based on its power supply and its capacitor, because these two things are going to have a direct impact on how long this weapon can maintain a constant rate of fire. All you need to do to greatly alter its damage potential is to give the capacitor more juice, which could allow it to fire for longer periods of time. And since it's a laser weapon, the Storm's not going to have the same limitations that ammo-dependent guns are going to have. The low ground clearance that the Storm has was also brought up as another issue. But the tank treads were built on an upward sloping angle which gives plenty of clearance along its undercarriage, and they've been divided up into 4 separate half treads that can be independently angled to better fit the terrain. Plus, a major advantage that the Storm gets for having its treads being splayed out so widely like they are is that it has an unusually wide base for its height, which makes it incredibly sturdy. The real issue here is whether or not the designers have given it enough torque to be able to power over any of the small obstacles that it ends up hitting. And if it doesn't, well, that's an easily fixable problem. The very last thing about the Storm that they addressed was with the anemic sounding components loadout that it was given. And apparently that's going to be part of a widespread refactoring of the component system, which is going to end up applying to every ship and vehicle in the game. But I wouldn't be too worried about this because the direction they seem to be going in is to make smaller components a lot more powerful than they currently are. So it feels like they've addressed all the main concerns that I had for the Storm. The only caveat that I can add to this is that knowing CIG, there's going to be a lot more armored vehicles coming in the future, with the two most obvious ones being a medium-sized tank, seeming how they've already come out with a heavy and a light one, and the other vehicle would be something that breaches the gap between the Cyclones and the Storm, which would most likely be some kind of armored APC that's small enough to be transported by a medium-sized ship. And then there's going to be the Xi'an, Tavaran, Vandal, and even possibly Banu version of these kinds of heavily armored ground vehicles coming out at some point. So if you missed out on this sale, don't worry, there's always going to be more. And you're also going to be able to purchase every vehicle and ship in the game using the in-game currency, so there's no reason for you to have to feel like you should rush out and go buy anything at this point. I've been your host, Law of the West. Thanks for watching, and take care.